things will work.
All right. You boys ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Because I'm an old soul, I've made myself a Negroni. I don't know if you guys are drinking
nice.
anything tonight, so.
No, I wish. I got to write tonight. I worked for 10 hours, and then I spent the next few hours with my family, so
Nice.
I need to write, man. I can't do that drinking.
What is a Negroni? I've never heard of that.
So the reason I know of it is it's this old like 70s old school thing. So it's gin, sweet vermouth, and Campari. It's this old Italian thing, and yeah.
Chris, you may be too fancy for this show.
But it sounds good, does it?
Oh, it's delicious. If you like, it's very gin forward. So if you like gin, you'll like this.
So it does the job. I like that. Okay. All right, here we go. Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Ghana, and all other major platforms, which includes Alexa. All you have to do is tell Alexa to play Dead Headspace podcast for the latest episode every Monday and Thursday. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, and alongside me is my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hey, everybody.
And today we are talking with sound designer, musician, and composer, Chris Campbell. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So we'd love to know what got you into horror.
So I listened to several of your guys' episodes, and I love that you guys start out with that question. And so I was thinking about it for this weekend, and I was like, really what it came down to was my dad and I, like when I was a kid, we always had this kind of weird relationship, like my whole life, but I was always trying to find ways to bond with him. And when I was little, I mean, like young, like way too young, the way that I would bond is like everyone else would go to bed and then he would stay up late and watch all these like horror movies when I was, so I was a kid, like growing up in like the late 80s, early 90s. And so I was probably like, between like 7, 8, 9. And I would stay up with him and he'd be watching Children of the Corn and like Pet Sematary and Exorcist and all this kind of stuff. And I would be scared shitless, but like, I got to like bond with my dad and like, watch these movies like underneath the blanket and stuff. And like, I mean, still to this day, like I'm a chicken, but I like being scared. Like, I think that's a thing that a lot of people that don't understand horror fans, it's not that I'm immune to like, being scared. I get scared really easy, but I like it, and I think just like over time, it grew on me. I mean, I remember watching It and like the original It, and that thing fucked me up for a long time. But like, I just like for whatever reason, I was still drawn to it, even that young. And it stuck around. So,
Brennan, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, that answer is, very, we hear it a lot, not that, people who are tied to the horror genre, whether it be through film, literature, or in your case, music, they're not immune to being scared. They're not, completely desensitized. If anything, a lot of times they're more prone to it. And it's that kind of imagination that the willingness to immerse yourself and kind of feel it a little harder than, somebody who might not necessarily be drawn to it that really creates that love of the genre, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like from the time, and I don't know, there's probably like some therapy that we can get into from here, but like from the time that I watched Amityville Horror the first time, I literally at least like 4 times a week, I wake up at 3:15 in the morning, like almost every day, and I'll know it's 3:15 and I'll be like, I don't care how bad I have to pee. I will lay there until it's at least like 3:18 because that feels a little safer, but like that stuff just like sits with you. And I know, like, I can't remember who it was, but I was listening to an interview with a director recently, and the guy that he works with often, who's written a couple of the films that he did, like the way he comes up with ideas for just scenes specifically is he purposely wakes up at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and then walks around his house thinking about what would scare the shit out of me right now. Like, oh God, if there was someone like staring at me through the window right now, yeah, I'm gonna write that down. And like that, like it's not like he's immune to it either, but he's willing to like sacrifice that to be able to, scare the crap out of someone else.
There is something odd about that time, 2 to 4 a.m. And
Yeah.
for me, I mean, it could be different for others, but I don't know if you're aware, but where I work is a wastewater treatment plant, and it's on an island by itself. It's on the outskirts of Atlantic City. They're constantly whirring, and you can't hear what's going. Like you should wear earplugs most of the time. You can't, hear most things around you, so someone could sneak up behind you. I remember I was reading Laurel Hightower's Whispers in the Dark this past February, and I was reading this one part. I'll just say it deals with a ghost and a bedroom. That's it. I was the only one on the third floor at night. It wasn't that early in the morning, and I just said, "Fuck this! I'm going downstairs where there's a few people." And it doesn't help that the fact that there have been those talks, like in horror movies, that hey, at 3 a.m, I think something's up there in the building where it's all industrial machines, where we're dealing with a huge furnace that burns shit. I'm just saying, it's a perfect breeding ground for something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, poets, writers, artists, like all throughout time always talked about specifically 4 a.m. And there's like a ton of poems like about that hour, that's kind of like all the night owls have gone to bed, but no one's really up yet. And there's just this stillness that I think is really beautiful. But I think at the same time, when everything else is shut down, I think we're just open and receptive to stuff more than we normally are. I don't think it's necessarily that things are more present than they, during that time. I think it's just that we're hyper aware, almost like, how someone that loses one of their senses, the other senses become stronger. I think it's like that kind of thing. So I think that just, I don't know.
That's just one more point on this, because that's a very astute point. My girlfriend at the time, lived in Providence, and she lived right off of the main highway. I forget I think it's 95, Brennan, going through Providence, downtown Providence. Yeah, so she lived a block away from 95. She literally lived in between two super busy streets. They ran parallel to each other. One was an Italian section, the other was a hipster section. I know it's a weird juxtaposition, but it was always loud because there was a fire department. It was like their main route that they go through there. But when we got our dog, she's 6 now, but she was a puppy then. She'd wake me up at 3, 4 in the morning to go to the bathroom, and nothing was making a sound. In like near the heart of Providence, I'm like, this is creepy. And sometimes she would just look up at the sky, and I'm like, please stop.
Yeah, I'm such a dog lover. We have a blue heeler. He's 2 years old now, and we last year, of course, pre-COVID. So I'm from Philadelphia, but I'm in Atlanta now, and we sometimes head up to the mountains. There's like these beautiful vineyards and like wine country up there, and we rented this old. It was a schoolhouse from like the 1800s that someone turned into just an Airbnb. And so we stayed there, and it was gorgeous, and like it just felt really peaceful. But like the second night that we were there, I woke up and my dog sleeps in the bed with us because he's spoiled as shit and we love him. And I wake up in the middle of the night and he's just sitting on the bed, staring into the corner and just low growling. And like he's awake, he's not sleeping. And I was like, we're supposed to stay 2 more nights, and we packed our bags and left the next morning. I was like, not that it felt like sinister. It was just like, hey, if you're cool, like being here, I don't want to see you. Like, we come in peace, we'll be out.
That's funny, Pat. When you said that the dog was just looking up into the sky, like my immediate thought was, well, at least it's not looking into an empty corner or something like that. That's far more concerning.
Brennan, have you been to that schoolhouse in, I want to say it's Rehoboth, where it's one of the first, when they had one room public schooling. So this is probably like 200-300 years ago. It's near that area, so maybe it's not Rehoboth, but it's in that one of those nearby towns. Anyways, there's supposedly hauntings there during Halloween. I don't know if it's true because I've looked in the windows, but still, like the mind plays so many fun tricks that even if you know it's bullshit, you put yourself in the right atmosphere, you're done. Game over, baby.
Man, like growing up in Philly, I played in punk bands and stuff, and my buddies and I, like, we were just all into this stuff, like always. We were of course into the Misfits and everything, and our band was like slightly horror punk, and you probably know of the famous abandoned asylum that's in Philly, and like there's a bunch of like ghost hunter episodes have been on this thing, and we would do stuff like that. We would go there and like break in and like freak each other out and that stuff. Like I've seen enough that I'm a believer if there ever was one. So
I was actually, that was one of my notes that you're from Philly. And I live about 45 minutes. I'll tell you off the air just in case I haven't said it on the air yet, because you never know if there's one weirdo that might show up at your house, and I don't want to miss that. But I live about 45 minutes east of Philadelphia. I love it there. My brother and I, when he comes down from Massachusetts and my dad comes down, like we like having beer and checking out. We love history, so it's brimming with it, man. And there's a lot of creepy shit that goes on, and there's a great music scene. So you got everything that you're into.
Yeah, no, I mean Philly's great. I mean a lot of my family's still there. So we head there at least a few times a year. Of course, I absolutely love New York. I mean I never really planned on having roots as deep as I do now in Atlanta, but I met a really cute Southern girl, so she called me down here. But the music scene, the film scene here is amazing, and so it's been great to be here. But if an opportunity arose that would bring us to New York, I think that'd probably be the next place that we'd easily. So yeah.
Before we branch out, I just gotta ask: are you a Philadelphia Eagles fan?
The only sports I'm into have two wheels, and that's about it. So yeah, I like growing up. We would always go to Phillies games just because like you could get in really cheap and like no one carded you, and you can like drink in the in the nosebleed section and hang out. It was like a very punk thing to go to baseball games for some reason, but that's about all I know.
So Chris, does that mean you have some sort of history with BMX, or am I missing a two-wheeled sport?
Yeah, no. So I grew up doing BMX, going to skate parks and stuff. Then I got into motocross, raced motocross for a while. Now I ride a bunch of, crotch rockets and stuff, but still do some dirt bike stuff. Still got into mountain biking and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Nice.
Now, sorry, go ahead, Brent.
I was just gonna say I grew up on BMX too. I don't think I've touched a bike in like 15 years, but a lot of good memories. What's that? It's just like riding a bike. There you go. And just a really fun way to kind of an excuse to go visit cities because they have always got good stuff to ride on, and an excuse to travel really to see cities you might not otherwise go to with good friends.
Yeah. But like the skate scene, the BMX scene, and music has always just gone like hand in hand. So that was kind of always just like my whole world for a very long time. Yeah.
I was into skating big time, man, and it's all because of Tony Hawk. I was just all about that for a few years. It's fun.
I never had the hang of it. I gave it a shot, but I mean, I learned how to ollie once, and then I was like, yeah, this isn't for me.
Never said I was good at it. It's like It's like pool or darts for me. I like it when I'm drinking. I'm not very good at it.
Well, that's dangerous. That's straight up dangerous. I think if you play in a punk band, though, somebody issues you a skateboard if you refuse your BMX bike. You have to to pick one.
Yeah. No, it goes hand in hand for sure.
So I'd like to, and I know you talked a lot about this you were on an episode with Mallerman, right, on Ink Heist?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, just make sure I remember that. Yeah, that's where I first heard you. Then I messaged you before I even finished the episode, and I was like telling you how much I was into that. And so Carpenter's Farm, you don't have to go into full details about that. You can if you want. I just wanted to, before we talk about it, for me as a listener, I felt there were influences of Gustavo Santaolalla. I don't know if I said his name right. He did a lot of soundtracks, one being The Last of Us, which is specifically what I thought it sounded like. Mainly because it's just like it swept you away. Like I was listening to it again. I don't even know how many times at this point I've listened to your soundtrack, but I felt like it was very acoustic. It felt like you could put me in nature. And honestly, how the hell did you do all that in such a short amount of time. Like it was magnificent. You are a magnificent composer. I'm not kissing your ass. You just are.
I don't know what to say to that other than thank you. I'm honored. Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that I've always just been into and what I think has opened doors, even opened doors for me when there was absolutely like more talented people that could have stepped into a role for a film project or whatever that I've done, has just always been like, if I see someone, an artist, a creator that does something that I'm inspired by, that I'm like, just like, shit, like you're so talented. It could be a sculptor, it could be a painter, an author, like whatever. Like I just enjoyed, and it's the beauty of social media, like when it's at its best, is to just be able to reach out to someone and just be like, man, I love what you do. Like, I'm this other guy. If there's any excuse that we could ever like do a thing together, like whatever that is, like, man, that would be a blast. And so I've just kind of always had that mentality to not be afraid to just reach out to people and just say like, hey, I love what you do. And not for any like, hey, hire me for a thing. Like, it's nothing like that. And like, but so when Josh, when he first started this, another author friend of mine saw his post before I did, and he was like, hey, Josh Mallerman's doing this live book thing. I think it'd be up your alley. You should write something, for it and just, kind of see where it goes. And so I did. He was on like chapter 4, and like the first 2 chapters are like 1 line each. So like he had only really written like 2 full chapters, and I read it, and it really hooked me. And like I already, of course, knew who Josh was and was already following him. And I read Unbury Carol, was the first book of his that I read before I saw Bird Box, of course. And I was just hooked. And like the thing I love about composing is that every project you have an excuse to dive into. I have so many musical influences, and every film project, whatever, is asking for something that pulls from one of those like many baskets that I have. And I just heard this, like this Last of Us, like almost Western thing kind of coming out. And that stuff just kind of started to just pour itself out. And once you've kind of established like a world, like a sonic landscape, and that this thing lives in, stuff just comes out a little like more fluid, like a little easier. And so, we got to a point where, he and I were then, we've become buds through this. And, we would get on a chat like on a Saturday, and he'd be like, all right, I finished these 3 chapters. Here's kind of what's happening. I would then sit down and write 3 suites, like write, record, mix, knock that out. And I mean, the beauty was that was kind of part of embracing lockdown. I mean, that was in the middle of, when things really got heavy. And I was working on a few projects at the time that got shut down because of it. And so things had sort of slowed down for me. And so this was this just beautiful escape to just kind of focus on something and just have this great creative exercise. So yeah, I'll do this thing where I don't even know where the question started.
And you're doing it with a guy that for a fact not only will get a result, but he's just brimming with this magnificent energy. That's the second time I've used it. I think both times are very appropriate because he's just not only always positive, and even when he's not talking super highly about something, which I've only seen that with the asshole in charge of the White House, that he's still nice about it.
Yeah.
And he's very energetic, and he has that energy that is very infectious.
Well, I mean, the thing he did, even during that whole project, and just kind of who he is as a person, like he's one of those people that you hope when you reach even like remotely that level of success and popularity, fame, whatever, like none of that comes up. Like he's nothing but just wants to share opportunities that So, like, I mean, he's talked about this a lot. Like, when he first started writing, there was this author that believed in him, that opened the door for him. And he's one of those people that's like, man, as doors open for me, I'm going to make sure I leave them open for the people that I'm bringing with me. And he's just one of those guys. And that's really inspiring. And I think a thing that we should all remember, and, you know, not just be focused on our own trajectory, but, you know, finding people. Like, it's important in any creative thing, in any career, is to have mentors, have people that are, you know, where you hope to be in 2 years, but then also be friends with people that are like, they want to be where you are in 2 years from now, and pull them up with you, and share whatever you can, and then vice versa. And he's just a great example of that.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that.
There's so many good examples of that within, you know, specifically within the horror writing genre, and he certainly embodies that. I also feel like he's kind of too busy to realize how important or famous or whatever word you want to put in there.
Yeah,
like,
I just think he doesn't care. Even if he had the time, I just don't think he gives a shit.
I think he doesn't give a shit about that.
It's not gonna change his output, you know. So why bother, you know, putting the thought into it, really?
Well, I mean, we had such I mean, we still do, like, such a good language with each other, because he was a musician first before he discovered his ability to write. And so, you know, that shorthand that we have, because, you know, we both know the touring world, we know the band world and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, another excuse that we have to just kind of, you know, have a lot of influences that are similar.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you were, whether you apply it to Carpenter's Farm or just your work in general, you know, you mentioned earlier, and, you know, I saw the term, I guess, applied to some of your other stuff, soundscapes. And it kind of strikes me as less the idea of, you know, Quincy Jones saying you can pluck a melody with one finger, and more of like kind of the Coltrane school of thought of with the sheets of sound. So I was wondering if you could just kind of talk about your creative process, again, in regards to Carpenter's Farm or whatever, with creating those soundscapes.
So like a big thing for me, it sometimes for like, let's say a film, there will be a melody that just, you know, comes into my head, that like I see this character, I see what they're going through, and I hear this, you know, actual song, and it could be played on several different instruments. This is a melody that speaks to them. But for me, what really sets a tone, what really like brings me into a space, is that sonic landscape that you set as a bed first. That's the thing that puts you into a place, and then whatever melody, whatever thing kind of comes out that you hear is this, you know, you hear this thing and you're like, oh, that's this person's, and it's usually subconscious, hopefully. Like, every time I hear this, I know this represents this person, kind of thing. But textures and stuff, like, I really like, I don't know, when it comes to music, and I don't have synesthesia. I wish maybe I have like a part of that, but like I can feel some of that when it's coming out right. Like, I can feel that texture, I can feel that space. When it's a horror project, if I'm doing it well, I can like taste iron because it's making me like taste blood because I'm scared. Like, that kind of stuff comes out. And like I build a lot of instruments, like a lot of weird ass shit that I don't want to just like, I don't work with templates. Like, I don't want to repeat myself too much. And so a lot of times I start with, like, I love pulling what I see on the screen visually into the music. So if there's something that's taking place in a warehouse and there's like sheet metal everywhere and everything looks sharp, like it's going to cut you, like I'm going to like literally use like sheet metal and stuff in the score, and you know, have that visual and sonic thing like connect together, because I think that's a great glue to start from, at least. And that kind of like that landscape, I think, just, I don't know, once you have that, I think the rest of the ideas just come really, really quickly for me.
I love that idea of the kind of multi-sensory experience, and I don't know if you know, what you described would classify as synesthesia either, but it's so interesting. I mean, I went to school for mainly music education, but like my focus was in advanced jazz composition, and
Oh wow.
all of a sudden I'm feeling like, man, I've never experienced anything like that. No wonder I'm not doing this for a living anymore. But that's just very, very interesting to me, the way that you're able to immerse yourself, not just connecting the sound with the visuals, but that you can bring in other elements to it as well.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna actually, one of my favorite toys. I don't know if I can hear this in the podcast, but this thing.
Yeah, play it.
That's like one of these beasts that keeps growing. It just started as this box with like a few chunks of metal on it that I like bow and everything, and now it has like microphones on the inside of it, and it's like a stereo thing that goes out, and then I have this whole like chain of pedals that it goes into, and the cool thing about starting with something like that is because it's so organic, like even just the stuff that's not on there, like you can touch it and rub your hands on it and have all these other things, like, you know, having a plug-in and just hitting a key, like that's fine, but like having something that again connects that texture and the thing that you're seeing on the screen, and you're bowing this as you're feeling this emotion, like I don't know, that stuff is also what draws me to like the whole like analog synth world, and Eurorack stuff is twisting knobs by hand, like actually getting your hands dirty and stuff like that's the stuff that excites me.
Yeah, and I mean it's all about finding that, you know, especially with the way you're describing your experience, you're not going to settle for a timbre that's pretty close. So I mean, it sounds like if you have an exact idea of the sound that you're looking to kind of add to represent one theme or another, that if you can, you know, program a synthesizer to get something like it, you're not going to settle for that. That's not going to be good enough. So if you have to build your own, you know, weird machine where you can bow coat hangers or whatever, that's what's happening.
Yeah, no, I love all that weird stuff. I recently got this thing. It's called a bull roarer, and you can see it in, I don't know, one of the Crocodile Dundee things, but it's like one of the oldest found what they consider a musical instrument of like mankind, and it's this little piece of wood that you sling around your head and does this.
Oh yeah.
Boom, 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 kind of thing, and my father-in-law, he has this big garage for motorcycles, and we emptied out the whole thing, and I put microphones everywhere so that it was in like a surround kind of pattern around me, and sat in the middle of it, and, you know, did this thing and made this surround instrument with this thing that, like, it's not a synth. You hear it and like you don't know what it is, and I love that. I feel like sometimes if you hear something, you're like, oh, that's a blah 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 blah, it takes you away from just experiencing what you want the music to make you feel, and instead now you're just listening to a piece of music. And so I love like using non-instruments to make that kind of stuff.
What was that used for?
Actually, nothing yet. This was just a thing that I found, and I had this sound design. There's a project I'm working on now that it might work for, but I try not to force that kind of stuff. Even if I think something sounds cool, I try not to just force it in there. But yeah, I think a lot of that kind of like downtime is just, you know, finding weird things. My wife just bought me a Aztec death whistle, which is it's a skull that not a real skull. It's like, I mean, I think they probably used to be, but it has. I'll show you.
Chris is getting up from his seat again. He's grabbing a real skull. He said it's fake, but it's actually a real skull.
So it has like a whistle on the top, and then like through where the jaw would have been, some of the air goes through there, but then they would cut slits in the back of the skull in different like lengths, so that when you breathe through it, it just sounds like someone screaming. It's really horrifying. But
now, is that a baby skull? I tried to keep a straight face when I said that. It's a very tiny skull. No, it didn't.
This one's actually a squirrel, you know. So.
Oh, okay.
I say that, cool. But I'm vegetarian, so for anyone listening, I'm not actually harming animals.
Or babies.
You know what? I'm a vegetarian too, and I'm offended, sir. What why did you become a vegetarian?
So I like it's been this off and on thing. I think for a lot of my life, like when I was in high school, of course, like just because I was in the acting art kind of community, like a lot of my friends already were, and I've always just been such a huge animal lover. And they kind of help me like just kind of figure out what that's like. Like, well, what do you eat that, that's not that, and not just eat junk food. So I was vegetarian like through most of high school and in my early 20s, and then just kind of went away from it. And then had been just kind of like trying to work back to that this year, like since January. I haven't had any meat since January 1st this year. But a thing I really learned from some of my vegan friends that, and I think this goes with most things anyways, is don't label anything. Like don't give yourself this strict set of rules. Like just be you, and if you don't want to eat meat, just don't.
Yeah.
But if there's a beautiful piece of fish and you're just really craving it, like it's don't kill yourself. Like it's okay, And I think that's the thing that I think has probably made me not stick to it before, is that I was trying to be so strict and kind of be mean to myself about it, that eventually it just kind of gets too hard. But if you're just like it's I don't know. So yeah, but yeah, for me, as far as purpose goes, it's just animal welfare. I mean, even when we were eating meat, I mean, my wife's a yoga instructor. I still ride mountain bikes and stuff, so it wasn't like we were eating unhealthy anyway. So it's not really that. It's really, I just like, I don't want to be part of that process, how animals are treated. And I mean, we still eat eggs, but we spend $10 on eggs because we make sure they're actually pastured and well cared for. But there's a film, a documentary that came out I think last year called 74 Cows or 70 something cows, and it was this, I think he's Irish or Scottish, and
they're the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm Irish, so I can say that. Yeah, all three of us are Irish.
But he inherited this cow farm like through his family, and for meat, and had continued to run this place, and he couldn't do it anymore. And he talks about like the last time he put cows onto this truck to go be slaughtered, and looking into their eyes and knowing how scared they were, and the amount of time he spent with them, raising them to get them to that place, to then just send them off. And like, he just couldn't do it. And he had 74 cows at the time that he decided this. And he was like, I'm changing my whole farm. I don't even know that I have the land that can do it, but it's going to become a vegetable farm, and I'm going to find a sanctuary for all of these cows. Wow. And he found a place that would take all of them. And it was something like the amount of money that he could have made had he just sold all of them for meat, like would have taken care of him for like a couple of years. And he was just like, no, I can't do it. And when he found the sanctuary, they all got to stay together, and all of their little family groups, like he watched them all like take off and to stay together, and did all the hard work to make that change. But it's stuff like that, I love animals too much.
That's amazing. You know what? I know this show's about you, but maybe you'll find this interesting. The reason why my wife's a vegetarian, she has been since she's been way before I ever knew her, but that's not why. I kind of started like thinking about the whole way animals are treated, but what did it for me was when I got a mini pig, and she's 3 now. It took about 7 months of having her, and I'm like, she's like a little kid. She's like a 5-year-old kid. She's incredible. She's annoyingly smart, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck about bacon anymore. I know she would probably eat meat or another pig if cut up correctly. I couldn't do it, and I still can't. And then I'm like, I can't do it with cows. I can't. I eat seafood. I'm a pescatarian, but I love seafood. So
I've had. I mean, this year. I mean, I've had fish, here and there. I kind of want to also give that up too, but again, I'm not like beating myself up for it. But have you seen Oakjaw?
I was gonna bring that up. That movie fucking destroyed me, especially the last scene. I won't ruin it. But the last scene with the baby.
If you're on the
pig.
fence about vegetarianism, go watch that movie.
Yeah, man. I actually want to address that in one specific book down the line. About I'm not gonna bore anyone with the details about like how we treat animals because I don't like it. But here's the thing: I'm like Brendan eats me, my friends and loved ones do. I don't care. Just don't eat my fucking animals.
No, I'm the same way. It's judgment-free zone, man. Yeah.
So I do have one more question on this. And I'm genuinely curious. So if you don't eat fish and you eat eggs, but what's your protein? Is it like beans or legumes or?
Yeah, I mean a lot of that for sure.
Okay.
We do. I do like protein shakes that are from like pea protein. Is like a thing I kind of use as like my after workout thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of beans and everything. I mean, we love Beyond Meat. I mean, I think that's just delicious.
Yeah.
I'm so worried that we're gonna find out that it's actually like just made from cancer or something. But
I was gonna mention that earlier. I forgot. So I don't think I could have. Maybe I could have, but I don't think I could have been a vegetarian like 5 years ago. It's so easy now.
yeah.
And the thing is like one of my guy friends said something about like, huh. So I thought you're supposed to get like healthy, but you're still chubby. I'm like, cool. Thanks, Dick.
Asshole.
You can still get fat by eating like an idiot like me who has too many carbs or has too much sugar. It's just the myths are pretty weird. And the way that people, I don't know about you, maybe it's the people I surround myself with, but the way that people treat vegetarians is like, it's nothing I'm going to cry about, but it's very strange. It's like, I went on to a bachelor party with my brother-in-law, and I got ripped on the entire trip. They're like, "Hey, here's some grass. You hungry?" And it's just like, "Oh, fuck you guys."
I think obviously it also depends on like where you are, but I mean, if you go into Midtown Atlanta, like I mean, every restaurant, like I mean, is like primarily vegetarian, and they'll have some meat, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's all good. You just kind of roll the punches and do your own thing.
Yeah. And actually, there is one other neat thing that in the Mid East is the biggest place in the world right now that does this. So they're working on a meatless steak where they are based. You saw that?
Well, go on because it might be a different story than I'm thinking.
So I want to say it was Israel or Iran. I ignorantly mix those two up often. But it was basically just scientists breaking down the components, the elements, the textures, the look and texture of fat on meat. Actually, it's not actual fat, and it's just. I think it's like within a 5-year period, it's gonna be super common where it's synthetic meat, and I like that. I mean, again, I love animals, so I'm a little biased.
I don't know. That wigs me out. I don't know. I'm just good.
Weird.
Like I don't need that.
So, Brendan, why don't you steer us away from this conversation in case we,
He's like,
I know.
"Oh,
I
thank
feel
God."
like I feel like I'm being like Catholic guilted right now, almost. Like it's.
No.
I had this period in my life where I gave that an honest go, and it was more than 5 years ago. So I mean, Pat, yeah, I'd agree with you. If you don't live in kind of a city-ish setting, that has that kind of hipster crowd, it really is hard. I remember living off Boca and Morningstar, and you'd go to a restaurant and their
Here's your
veggie
salad.
menu, yeah, exactly. Here's your salad, or we could put a piece of lettuce on bread if you want some carbs.
Well, do 5 Hail Marys and a fuck you and carry on, sir. Still good Catholic way.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm like we need to steer the subject elsewhere because I'm embarrassed right now. I'm getting reverse vegetarianized. Usually you guys are used to people picking on you. So now it's your turn to return the favor and shame me. Now the good news is I'm probably going to die 20 years before the two of you. So there's that.
Well, who will be all right, Chris will be my new co-host.
You guys can talk about vegetables all day and tofu.
All right, so you're typically the good segue person, so I'm going to go back to what do you want to go? Do you want to dive into music? Horror?
You know what? We have jumped all over the fucking place. We went from, you liked watching movies and letting them make you uncomfortable when you were little to talk about Carpenter's Farm. We skipped a little chunk of time there. So I figure we go back and we visit that.
Yeah.
So Chris, I'm wondering if that, if those horror movies at all kind of tie in with your journey to music, or if you kind of went back after the fact and said, there was some cool atmosphere building, there was some cool music stuff in those movies.
The weird thing is, like, I don't know. I mean, by the time I was probably 12 or so, minus, of course, maturity and all kinds of stuff, as far as the things that I like and even some personality, like, I haven't changed much since then. Like, I really like a weird thing that happened that I did have to look back at was, like, when I was getting into films like that, when, again, was like way too young to be getting into them. I was also like, I'm such a huge Tim Burton fan, and like I would watch, of course, like Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, and all of that. And I was too young to really know like what a film composer was, but I knew I loved the music, and I could like hum like the entire score, like beginning to end, without even knowing that there was like a person tied to it. I was just like, oh, that's the music that goes with this movie. And there was a way all of that made me feel that I could always identify when I heard it somewhere else. So like Family Dog was this cartoon that Danny Elfman scored.
I was going to ask if you like him because he's done all those movies.
Yeah, exactly. So he's one of my biggest heroes.
And he did the greatest Batman movie. Sorry to interrupt again. Batman, the Michael Keaton one, man.
Absolutely, man. But like, so Family Dog was this cartoon that came out on Amazing Stories, which was this old, like, late 80s show that had all these. It was like a less creepy version of like Creep Show or something. Every episode was like super different, and this cartoon came out, and I remember like hearing the music, and the music made me scared. Like, even though like it wasn't that dark of a cartoon, it was kind of weird. But and then like I would hear it elsewhere, like even like The Simpsons. I was like, why is that theme like so like otherworldly? Like where is that? And then I would find like I was drawn to this music, and it was all just, many different genres. And once I was old enough, I was like, oh, it turns out there's like this musician that I actually am in love with, and I didn't know it. And so that like definitely kind of brought my musical taste and film taste to a certain place. Because of that, I got into like a lot of Vincent Price films and everything. While I was in like junior high and whatnot. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, but like, you can't hear music yet. You're just repeating the thing that you're seeing on the page. Like, you don't really understand what it is that you're doing. And so that didn't really stick for that long. And I hated it, that kind of thing. But then as I got older, like when I was 12, I got my first drum set because I was like, I thought drums was going to be like a thing. And when I found drums, I could like, everything clicked. I could hear music. I finally like understood what it was that I was doing, and just fell like head over heels in love, and like just locked myself in my room and just played the shit out of my drums. And that became my first love, which still is. I currently have a set of V drums behind me, but
what brand? Yeah. I'm a drummer. Brennan's the pianist and a bassist. I fucking love drums, man. I like the harmonica too, but I'm not good at it.
Nice. Blues horn. So I had like this. shitty CB, which is like the crappy brand of Tama.
That was my first. That's my first drum set too.
That was mine.
They suck.
Oh, it's terrible. But then a buddy of mine, when I was playing, I still didn't get a new set yet. He played, and we hung out a lot. And he had a Tama Rockstar, and the kick drum on those, which they don't make anymore. I can't remember the size of that, but I remember like going to his house and playing those, and I was like, holy shit, this is what they should sound like, and kind of fell in love. So like, yeah, I mean, I still have an acoustic set. I don't play it here. And I finally found an old Rockstar, and so I bought that just because I've always loved it. But I have like the first snare my dad ever bought me was Slingerland, which is Buddy Rich's company. We had those. It's this big steel thing. It's deep as hell. That thing sounds awesome. But so drums was like the thing I found, and then shortly after I discovered punk, and like just head over heels in love with music. But like the thing is even when I was super into like the Philly street punk scene and the New York punk scene, like I was still also in love with film music, horror stuff, Danny Elfman things. Like, I was still just a film dork, and those two things just continued to grow at the same time. But I never knew that like being in the film world and doing this music thing was a possibility. I just thought that the path was then being in a band, touring, making albums, that kind of thing. And so I ended up played in several bands, but then I was in a punk band in high school, and we got signed, and literally like graduation, and a month later headed out and was on the road for like 3 months and got to see the entire US by the time I was 18. And it was awesome. And I thought that was kind of like the journey. But, as we all know, that whole, like, I think I'm going to be a rock star thing, it's just, that's a whole beast. And it wasn't for me. But I kind of left there and came back to Philly, went to school for music theory for a while, got really disheartened because I got really tired of professors just talking about music as science and math. And like, we just break down, like, nothing about like the art behind it or the mood behind it or anything. It was just dissecting it in a way that was not enjoyable. And so then I left and went to school in Florida, Full Sail University for audio production, because I was just in love with being in the studio. And that kind of opened my eyes to going back to like, oh, this whole film composition is a thing. Still didn't really pursue it, but a bunch of the guys that I went to school with in Orlando, I really knew nothing about the South, but I went to school with a bunch of guys that were from kind of like South Carolina, Atlanta areas, and they were like, hey, after school, a bunch of us are moving to Atlanta because it's a really cool film scene, cool music scene. And I was like, a bunch of, like, all my friends in Philly, like everyone, once they were at an age, went to LA or Colorado or something, like everyone left. And so I didn't have a whole lot tying me down there. And I was just like, you know what, I'll give Atlanta a shot. And came down here, started a band. We were relatively successful, but through that had some opportunities to score a couple films, because a lot of the stuff we were starting to write was definitely leaning towards, like, it was film music. I mean, we were starting to, it was like, people described it as the soundtrack to a bar fight in the 1920s. And so that was kind of my first taste of that. And it, again, the whole being in a band, touring world, like, it didn't pan out to be a thing that was going to last forever. And so that kind of fell apart. And then I hated it because I sort of walked away from that scene. But at the time, I got to a place where, like, I could go to a show in Atlanta and people would, like, recognize me, and this was really cool. And I just, like, walked away from all of it. And then ended up this is a really long-winded like answer to this question, and I'm just rambling. So just interrupt as soon as I'm boring anyone.
Keep talking.
But I got married, and kind of got comfortable with like day job stuff, but then I ended up going through a divorce and was dealing with some mental health stuff on my own, and got to a place where I was just like, I need to go be with family, and I left everything. I quit the band I was in and everything, went back home to Philly as a 29-year-old man, and moved in with my parents and all that kind of stuff. But got help, and was a better man for it. And through that, one of my friends that I had met while I was in Atlanta at the time, who's now my wife, we stayed in touch and kept talking while I was up there, and romance blossomed. And a pretty Southern girl called me back to Atlanta, and that's now been 6 years ago, and coming back like with a clear head and just a hunger to do this thing the right way. And I don't know, just the funny thing was like kind of re-entering this scene, the film scene, the art scene in Atlanta. Like the first couple films I was on, and I love being on set when I get to work on a film. I love being there and like meeting the people and get to like see the project, and like I love that environment. And like a couple of the first projects I'm working on, like I'm the oldest guy there. I mean, probably only by 10 years, but still, like, it was weird at first because I was beating myself up because I was like, man, you had it. You could have been here 10 years ago, but you walked away from everything. The other side of that is like, had I been getting the opportunities that I'm getting now, then I would have blown it. I mean, I was drinking way too much. I was, I was an asshole, like all this kind of stuff. And it's like now to be at this place where I'm just this, like, such a more peaceful person. Like everything just seems to just work. It's meant to be. I mean, it is what it is. Everyone's on their own journey, and we don't know what's around the corner. I would have done a million things differently, but like I'm so grateful for where I am today, and going through what I went through just makes me a more empathetic person too. So like it's hard to be an asshole when I don't know your struggle, like, but I can imagine, when I meet anyone. So anyways, sorry, that went dark and deep, but
no, that's perfect. And I mean, the place it ends up is you are exactly where you are supposed to be right now, and that any other journey is not going to wind up with you there.
With
you
your
get
wife.
those exactly.
That's the most important thing.
What I kind of take away from that is if you did have, you might say, man, I wish I had those opportunities 10 years ago. But if you did, and, your hypothesis is right, and you had blown them, like, where, 10 years later, where are you? Probably not in as mentally good a place, probably not as good as a professionally good place.
Yeah.
I kind of like the way that wraps up, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I do too. And that's like a thing I learned in that whole process too. That's a thing that I really cling to. And I was talking to someone earlier today, and I really wish I could remember the poet that said this, but I had to learn also, like, when you, like, if you meet someone and you're like, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm an author. It's like, you're a human being who writes books first. And when I would identify myself as like, hey, I'm Chris, I'm a musician. I'm Chris, I'm a human being who plays music. And when you wrap up your identity with the thing that you do, and I think the quote that this was like, something like, if you do that, inevitably you become that thing, and that's your curse. And if any of that's ever taken away, like, there's nothing underneath you and you just fall. And so I think I had to learn that first, is like, and that's been a great release too, because I think before I'd be like, I'm just this thing, but now I'm like, screw it, yeah, like, you know, I compose films and it's a dream come true, but like I got back into painting, like, you know, I love sculpture. I mean, friends of mine during COVID, like, you know, I wrote a film and we shot like the short film just because we love creating stuff. Like, it's do your thing, you know. I mean, certainly you have your path career wise, but that was a really valuable lesson to like not just tie in my identity with a thing I do.
That kind of goes along with Mallerman's point that he said to us, whatever the fuck that was. I think I want to say 2 months ago, but that doesn't matter anymore. He said something to the effect of that I am paraphrasing him, so forgive me if I'm doing a terrible job. But basically, that there's a pitfall that younger or newer authors tend to become victims of, which is that they say, all right, this is my first one, let's put everything about me in it. No, it's one book. It breaks up one part. And that was kind of how, since he wrote some, Brendan, correct me if I'm wrong, but he said since he wrote so many books before, he didn't feel a pressure within himself to do that to himself. I'm just throwing this in there because it piggybacks off of two successful individuals that I think it would be helpful for someone that maybe if they're listening to this, they're like, didn't think of that. Maybe that'll save me a little trouble.
Yeah. My wife is excellent at that too, as far as what you're saying, like putting everything into a thing. Like I play her everything that I'm working on, so you know,
nice.
Have her come down. And the great balance is she hates horror. Like she hates being scared. Like a lot of the projects that I work on, she kind of like watches like this, would prefer to just hear it. But she also, like, because of that, I'll play her something and she'll be like, that's not very scary. I'm like, okay, I need to make it scarier. That kind of thing. But also, like, I'll play her stuff sometimes that she's like, okay, that sounds cool. Do you need that much in there? Like, you don't have to throw everything at the screen. And so she's a great balance for that, to just be like, you know, sometimes that texture was just fine. You didn't have to layer 15 more tracks on there to accomplish the same thing the two were already doing.
Did a side question? Does she like serial killer documentaries?
It depends on how they're told. I mean, right. She likes you know, nonfiction in that way. Not necessarily a thing she's looking for, like you know, so like Princess and the Frog, that Disney film, like that scared her. The scene with the voodoo stuff. So that's kind of where she's at, which is a great balance for me, because, like, you know, if it was me, you would walk into the house and all the walls are painted black, and then I turn around and this giant, like, throne with skulls on top of it, and I'm like, so she keeps me grounded nicely.
Brennan, sir.
I was going to say, I think Patrick asked that because we're finding a theme, at least at among us two, at least with
our wives as well.
Horror writers with or horror genre people with wives who don't care for horror but really enjoy that whole true crime genre, be it documentaries, podcasts, or what have you.
It's like, yeah, the fiction stuff scares me, but tell me about the really crappy stuff that really happened.
I remember, I was going to say, there's an author I have in mind who writes just horrifying stuff. And I remember him saying that he started reading the book I'll Be Gone in the Dark, about the Golden State Killer, and he couldn't sleep for a week. You know, and the shit this guy dreams up, it's awful. It's awful. But you know, you get that kind of taste of, oh, you know, this actually happened. I better lock my damn door. And it's a whole different world. It's a whole different ball game.
Let's dive into some projects you're working on now, because I did
actually
see
real quick, because I had
Go
something
ahead.
I wanted to touch on that.
Sure.
You said, I think you said it like a half an hour ago, Chris, but that's okay. I'm going to bring it back up. You were talking about how, you know, Danny Elfman is a huge influence on you. And first of all, you know, you said one of the things, even though his film music is not necessarily always horror, but it has that kind of like spooky, creepy element to it, or at least that kind of. To me, it mixes like kind of the manic zany with spooky,
Yeah.
but then you recognized it in The Simpsons, and how freaking cool / Danny Elfman is it that he took a cartoon and he started it off with a tritone, the most dissonant interval you could possibly start, a cartoon theme song with. And that's just very him. Now, my question to you, I don't know if you know this, but I always heard that Danny Elfman either can't or doesn't read music. I wonder if you know anything about that.
As far as Danny Elfman, I'm not sure, but to speak for my case, I used to be able to sight read. I mean that was like my whole training. When I walked away from when I got really like just kind of turned off by just and I don't feel this way now, but I got to a place where I was just like, I'm losing my fire. I'm losing my passion for just making stuff that I like, because now I'm hyper analyzing it and no, this shouldn't go there and all that kind of stuff. And to me, I just like, I hear, like I dream about songs and I dream about melodies and I wake up and write them down. And like, it's just my world. There's just always stuff. It's never quiet up here. And I felt like when I was analyzing it too much, those sounds were getting quiet. And so I know what I'm looking at when I like look at sheet music, but it's not my thing. I mean, if you put it in front of me, like it would take me a while to like figure out what the hell I'm playing. It's not it's not me. But as far as like the theory goes, like, yeah, I mean, I think it's important. And, for sure, I can talk to other musicians about it. Like I know enough of that, but I think the other cool thing that I like about at least the type of stuff that I work on, at least now, I like not needing to explain where this thing came from. Like, I mean, I love like it. I wrote this super simple like piano and cello piece for this short film I did recently, and like it's totally wrong. Like it doesn't make sense where it lands, but it just sounds right to me. And I think when I was so focused on all of that, it would have been like, you can't do that. No, but it works. And I don't know if that is true about Danny Elfman. I imagine that's probably the same thing for him, is that like, this just sounds right to me and therefore I'm going to do it.
I heard that about John Lennon as well. I don't know if that's true, but
I heard it about Paul McCartney. I wonder if that kind of goes hand in hand.
You know what? Individually, they're great. Together, it's like, ooh, you guys should write music together. You could be pretty good.
Regardless of whether it's true for one of those people or all three of them, I think it definitely, plays off what Chris was saying. Everybody's journey is different, and especially nowadays where there's so much evidence about, people learning in different ways, even if you just break it down to visual learners versus auditory learners. I'm very much a visual learner. Even if I've played a piece 100 times, I can do it better if I have that sheet music in front of me, even if I'm not looking at it, if I have it there to fall back on if I need it, a chord chart, lyrics, something like that in front of me when I'm trying to play. Well, whereas I have, students like private instrument students who come into me and I'm their third teacher because for whatever reason, their parents really fucking want them to play piano, even though they hate it. And as soon as we say, okay, this music reading thing, not even like boil it down to this is hard for you, but it doesn't make sense to you. You can hear the sounds you want to come out with. You can hear the harmonies you want to make. You just can't read it off a piece of paper. So why the fuck are we making you read it off of a piece of paper?
Well, and I think that's exactly where I was. I mean, I could do it just fine, but it didn't have a lot of value to me. And I mean, I started playing drums and stuff, but then once I was playing in bands, like hanging around guitarists and stuff, I picked up a guitar and I would just start playing it. And the way I learned how to play guitar is I just sat down and played guitar to my favorite albums, and it's funny because like my wife, she wanted to learn guitar. She's an amazing singer, by the way. She's a musician in her own right. But she wanted to learn guitar, and she got frustrated after like me teaching her for like 2 months because she couldn't play yet. And I'm like, I gave up like my childhood to be able to play the instruments that I can. Like, you're not going to learn this in a month. I locked myself in a room and played this stuff. And like, I didn't need to necessarily read it because I could just repeat it as soon as I heard it. I could just, and that's how I learned. But again, everyone's journey.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And most of my students, most of my private students, tend to be between like 6 and 12. But I have one student who is in her, she's probably about the same age as me, in her mid-30s, and she has been trying to learn piano since she was in like 4th grade, and she just won't give up on it. And it wasn't until every piano teacher that she had said, you need to learn it this way. And I had to throw at her like, why? Why can't we use chord charts like instead of written sheet music? Why can't we label the notes? I know that your average music teacher is going to say, well, you can't write A, you have to learn that it's on the second space or whatever. But you're not training to be the conductor for the Boston Pops. You're not training to be your theory teacher at Juilliard. Like, why the fuck do you need to go about it in that direction if you can find a plausible alternative that's going to allow you to create music? And I mean, I really feel like that speaks to a lot of different paths, not just necessarily music ones. The society kind of deems that we go down a certain path and we learn a skill a certain way, we live life a certain way, when it's just not necessary. And some of us who can excel doing things one way are told that's not the right way to do it, so we can't do it. And I feel like I should have a really cool like wrap up for this, but I don't. So I'm just gonna stop talking.
I think that makes you a great teacher. I mean, and I applaud you for that. I used to do drum lessons when I was still in Philly, and I had a few students, and they were about that age, like probably like 10, 9 or whatever, and I loved it. Like I don't want kids. I don't have kids. I have a puppy, and there's plenty. Like I enjoy being around them in like small doses. But like when I would do lessons, it was at least like this thing. Like I'm usually really awkward around kids, but at least we had like a common thing, that we could talk about. They want to learn this, and that was a blast. As soon as I have time, I think I would love to pick that up again. I did like teaching.
I forgot how to read music. Brennan actually asked me a week or so ago, and I played drums for the school, like concert band, whatever the fuck it's called, and played it for 4 or 5 years, and don't remember. I just played a music I like you, man. I mean, like my brother plays a piano, and he's also this is funny. I don't know if I told Brennan this. My brother's a bassist and a pianist, and we would just, when I lived with my parents and he did back in Massachusetts, we would just jam in the garage. Maybe smoke a little, and we would play Jimi Hendrix or some other rock, because we're big into rock from the 70s, so we just fuck around with that stuff.
That's cool, man.
Look, I don't mean to disrespect drummers, I promise, but
go fuck yourself. I don't like how you worded that.
Hear me out. It seems to me that the reason that drummers have to learn notation is nothing else besides equity. Everybody else is stuck reading the sheet music thing, so we have to give it to drummers as well. If there's any instrument that doesn't need sheet music, it's you guys, and you're this, especially drum set notation is so fucked up.
It is, but I mean, the funny thing is, like I played in the school band. Like a year, because my parents made me when I was playing drums, and I remember. And this was like the band, and like and I just like I could read the sheet music, but like once I heard it once, I was just like, fuck it, whatever, I'll just play the thing. And I remember like I was playing like a hi-hat, like I wasn't even on like a full drum set, and I was just playing the song. I wasn't even looking at the sheet music. I remember we finished, and our teacher was like, "Hey, Chris, great job. Way to like follow whatever." And I'm like, "I'm fucking reading sheet music and playing the damn song."
That's the universal drummer experience. You see a fifth grade concert band and the saxophones, the trombones, the trumpets, their eyes are all locked on there, like learning how to read their pitches. And the drummers are perfect. And you go back and you check on them, and they're not even looking at the right damn page.
I
Yeah.
like the drums because I could sit down, which is the same reason I'm a writer. I'm just a lazy motherfucker. So, Chris, I'm very curious because you've described instruments that I didn't even know were in existence. What is the most unique instrument that you have made?
I don't know what I call the nightmare box is probably that right now, anyways.
Okay.
But I also made a cello type thing out of a Home Depot bucket, and that has a pickup in the back, and I could send that through pedals and stuff too. So yeah, I have a buddy who's he's a metal sculptor, and he's working on teaching me how to weld, and I would really love to get into welding and to start making like metal pieces that mostly percussive things. So that's kind of next on my list.
Oh, right on, man. Learn to weld and you can work at my job.
Awesome.
Now, Chris, I have a question, and as a percussionist, I'm very interested in your answer. But when you're composing, how do you go about choosing a key? Is it just kind of happenstance, whatever you kind of hear it in your head, that's the key, or?
Yeah, I mean, if it's melody driven, it's usually because it's already in my head, and then I just kind of find it. I will say, and this is just admitting, sometimes it'll be like, I may have this new melody that sounds very different, and then when I sit down on the piano to play it, I'm like, oh fuck, that's also an A minor, and then I'll just change it just because I like the thing I did before was also an A minor. I'm like, well, fuck it, it's in C sharp now. But like sometimes that doesn't work because I mean, like even just like key changes, even if it's the same pattern. Of course, the three of us know this. Like every key has a mood, it has a tone, it has a thing that goes along with it, even if it's still minor, even it's still, but like A minor and C sharp minor do not sound the same. I mean, obviously, yes, of course they don't sound the same, but like they don't feel the same. And so sometimes I'll want to do that because I was already like in this key for this other thing, and I just can't because it just doesn't feel right. But other times, if it's textural, a lot of that will come down to if I'm hearing a texture or I've made a thing that's making a texture, and once I've kind of built the virtual instrument around this thing that I've recorded and sampled, it might just sound good when it hangs out on this note. It might just sound right there. So I think it's mostly like heart.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll get too heady about it, and I think that's kind of when I fuck stuff up, and then I have to kind of go back and just be like, when I like quicker turnaround projects because I don't have the luxury of overthinking, because often like the first idea is usually the best. And I like just you go with your gut. Sometimes it's wrong for sure, but I think it's also the most honest when you're just kind of like, I don't know, this just feels right. This for whatever reason.
No, I fucking love that answer because we had one other composer on here, and he was, forgive me if you don't agree with this, he was a little more theory driven, where I guess I would consider you a little bit more heart, more soul driven. If you don't disagree with that, I'm going to go ahead and label you that way.
I don't disagree.
And I specifically asked him the question, do you put any stock in, the way that different keys kind of have, people have assigned, I think E minor is the saddest key, D major is the key for victory, for triumph and stuff like that. And I almost thought about asking you that, but as soon as you started talking about how it's just the way you go with it, the way you hear it, I kind of dropped it. But then you immediately bring that back, like, A minor and C sharp minor, they're not going to have the exact same quality to them. Yeah, it's the same intervals, it's the same a minor scale is a minor scale, but just starting on those very slightly different pitches is going to result in a different quality to the melody.
Yeah.
So no question here. I just really, I really like that, I have somebody else who says, you know what? This song is I like the minor, I like the way the melody sounds, but it's not fucking sad enough, so I'm gonna move it to E.
Yeah, and like, I mean, a lot of it too is instrumentation. I mean, like, to me, I love. You should see the size of my fucking sub in the studio. Like, I love low end shit. Like, I want to hear like the deepest things. Like, when I have the opportunity to just like, bring the thunder, I want to. And so, depending on the instrumentation, like, if like, I mean, I've done guitar stuff where I've done drop C. It doesn't hold very well, but like, so you're kind of limited. Like, I can't go much deeper until I sample it, and then it starts to sound artificial and that kind of thing. If it's going to be cello driven, like, I'm kind of limited on that range. So like, I do enjoy hanging out in the lower register of instruments. So some of that's also kind of taken in consideration, but not much. It doesn't feel right.
No, oh, sorry, Pat. I'm jumping in real quick with a follow up. Random question, Chris, but do you know the band Thrice?
I know that name. Why do I know that name? I don't know.
That
sounds familiar, but I don't know.
They have they're one of my favorites, and they have an album called Visu, Vheissu. I have no idea what that means, but it's one of my favorite albums of all time, and the album notes to it, are they go above and beyond lyrics. They kind of go into the recording process, and just you mentioning some stuff like that really kind of reminded me of the recording of that album, where they wrote a song and they said, we like this, but we're gonna try. I think they put one of their guitars in drop B tuning. They said, we had it in drop C, and it just something wasn't working there. So the strings are flopping around like freaking Jello, but they put it in drop B tuning for that, and they said, this is the song we wanted. That half step makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
There was another one where the bridge kind of has this kind of snare roll that leads into the last chorus, and I think they tried something like 34 different snares before they found the exact one that, like, this is the sound.
Yeah.
And just I'm reminded of that because it's that kind of sounds like your process a little bit.
Yeah. No, I just wrote that down because I'm like, I need to invest in these people more. But yeah, I mean, if you saw, like, I cringe at the there's been times when there's been people that have approached me that are younger in school and, kind of want to see what I do. And I'm like, you don't really want to hang out in here while I sit here and go, no, and go through like 37 different choices of something until I'm like, yes, that's it. And often I do know when I get to that place where something's not working, it's usually what leads to me making something, because I'm like, hey, none of this is right, and then I just kind of like start from scratch. But so yeah, going through that many snares, yeah, I've been there.
So the composer that Brendan brought up, his name is Nelson Everhart. He's a media composer. He's done his probably most well known is Turok Evolution for the GameCube, Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion. He did a bunch of games it was all Acclaim that he worked for.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was really fun to talk to because I initially found him because the Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion came for the N64, and it was creepy as fuck. And I played that when I was 12, and I was like, hey, he's actually on Twitter, and he actually replied. So
that's dope. I would love to work on a game. I'm actually, like, I'm not a gamer. I like games. I play games sometimes. But I don't know. I think it's partly attention span. I don't know what the issue is. I just, like, I can't hang. But I love the immersiveness of that stuff. Of course, like Silent Hill, I mean, Resident Evil, of
Yeah.
course, Doom, especially like the new Doom. So Mick Gordon is the composer that's worked on Doom. What's the other one? He's incredible. I'm like
Quake.
obsessed with this guy.
You're talking about for id?
No. He did Killer Instinct. What else? I'm looking at my playlist. I like sometimes that's like my running music is like I'll listen to his score to Doom because I'll like run fast as hell. But Wolfenstein.
Yes.
He did that in 2014. But I would love to work on a game. I think that's because it's such a different just process because you're working on these loops and things that can then like become this other thing, and it's different than just seeing the final product on screen and you're writing to this thing. It's linear. I would just love that exercise to totally get away from that.
No,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I feel bad because it almost sounded like I was dragging him before, and I'm absolutely not. But
I'm telling Nelson.
You're messaging him right now. But no, I mean like any composer, and I've kind of latched onto it with you. But any composer is going to be, they're going to want control over that timbre, over that exact sound, over the exact dynamic and whatever. But if you're composing, back in 1996 for the Nintendo 64, and they're saying, okay, you're composing, but here are your limitations.
Yeah, which
like,
were
that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, which were super tight back then. Which, of course, we all go back to like Mario Brothers. I mean, that fucking theme is insane. I mean, like I remember in college, like I was in this band when, of course, I don't smoke as much as I used to, but we would just sit there and blaze up for like a long time and learn like the whole like. I mean, we could play the entire first level, but of course, you smoke enough and you just sit there and you just play the same note like 17 times. You're like, yeah, okay, but yeah, I mean, those limitations, like as a drummer, a thing that I used to do in our old band is like, if I was feeling stuck, I would just like take away all my cymbals and like, okay,
oh no,
now play the song, so I love that kind of thing. Like, okay, so this thing that you're hearing now, try to figure out how to play that on just the side of the floor tom, instead of a hi-hat.
Oh wow,
I love that kind of thing.
Now I wanted to ask, do you have a particular favorite cymbal brand? Because I want to see if it matches with mine, and a favorite drumstick brand. I'm really curious to know.
I've never been like when it comes to that kind of thing, and when it comes to guitars too, I've never been like this tech guy. I think mostly because I spent so much of my time as a drummer being just broke as fuck. So it was like my favorite cymbal band is like whatever someone could give me. So like, I mean, I always had Zildjians, but like I played on nicer stuff, sure. But a lot of the music I was always into, like, I mean, I love Tom Waits, Man, I'm into that kind of thing. So the darker, the nastier, the, not crisp, broke ass kind of sound is sort of what I went for. Like, I polished my cymbals one time and I was like, oh God, they sound terrible now. They sound too good.
I totally get it. Yeah, gritty sounds are pretty awesome.
Patrick, is your brand Zildjian?
It is, but I think that's because I really only have played Zildjian. Same reason.
I think that might be the only company that makes cymbals.
They're also from Massachusetts, so maybe I'm a little biased.
Really?
They are. They are. They're an old cymbal company.
I bet your brand of stick is Vic Firth as well.
You saw my tweet.
No, I didn't. It's just that's every drummer plays Zildjian. Every drummer. Well, when I was in school, I had to take a percussion class with actual percussionists, and I went to you had to have sticks, and I went to the store and I was just like, give me the cheap ones, and the percussionists, and I'm not even exaggerating here, the percussionists literally made fun of me because I had Vader sticks and not Vic Firth. Like that's. I don't know. I guess that's the shit brand. That's the cheap brand.
I mean,
everybody plays Vic Firth.
So this is my guitar pick of choice.
Can you
Dunlop.
describe that to audio listeners?
Hey, yeah, that's the thing too, isn't it? So the green Dunlop, I mean,
Yep.
they have this matte finish. You can actually hang on to them. That's my thing. When it comes
Dunlop is the
stick,
Vic Firth of guitar.
exactly. But like what I always went to, so like what size stick do you play?
I don't know.
So, like when I first started
The
playing,
one that hits drums.
well, when I first started playing, especially in punk, like I was playing these 5As because they were like jazz sticks, but I could move fast as hell, but I wasn't hitting very hard.
Oh, we're talking about the width of the stick, not the length. I think you said length. Maybe
People don't care about the length; they care about the width.
It's about the curve.
We're not talking about drumsticks. Sorry.
And frankly, if we're honest, it's about the motion of the sticks, not even the girth.
It's all in the wrist. So I remember that I don't like it too skinny, but I don't like it too thick. It hurts my wrist.
That was the thing that I had to. This is so bad. We got to get off this. But I'm losing my train of thought now. But I remember the first time I went into a studio, like when we had like an actual producer, and I was playing with these little 5As because I could play fast, but like I didn't understand like the tone of hitting the drums yet, and he was just like he switched out my sticks. He's like, you can't play these. Like I can't even hear the snare on this, you know.
Yeah.
And then after that, like I started working on, and also like especially when you're a drummer, like fitness and stuff and like weightlifting like helped. But then I started playing with like fucking like tree trunks because it just like could beat the shit out of the snare. And it took a while to get the speed back playing with something that thicker. But like I could care less what brand it is. It's about like the size has to feel right to me.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a good point. Now I do want to move things towards your projects that you're currently working on. On your website, you mentioned it looks like When It Comes. I don't know what that is. Looks like a film. It says a film, so I'm assuming it's a film.
I probably need to update a few things on the site. So When It Comes, that's a film we shot right before COVID hit. We're actually still kind of stuck in post-production because we need to go back and do some pickup shots, and things have kind of like held off on that. But that's been a super fun project. So the director, J. Zachary Thurman, super talented guy. He's here in Atlanta, and that was our first project together that we started. And I signed on to that early enough. This is one of those films where I was able to write just a ton of music and bring it onto set, play it for the actors. It's a story about takes place in the 70s, and there's this creature that after it kills someone, it can take their shape. And there's this guy who his whole family's been killed by this thing, and so he's just out for revenge. And so he's kidnapping girls to be bait for this thing, basically. But it was a super fun project, and musically was a blast because, again, like going back to pulling what I'm seeing on screen into the music, all the percussion was trees and sticks and leaves, and like actually another time that we were staying up in North Georgia in the mountains, we rented a place, and I just spent like the whole weekend just sampling just all kinds of stuff in the woods, and to just get all this texture and everything. And so like I absolutely love the score for that, and I'm really hoping we get to wrap that up hopefully early in next year. So that's one. I just finished another short film also with that same director, with Zach, that was really cool because it was different for me. It was a drama, this really heartbreaking story that's now out on Vimeo. It's kind of starting to make its rounds. We're probably going to do a longer version of that and head to festivals next year.
Nice.
But that was a blast, and that was the one that I was referencing earlier. That was like literally just piano and cello. That was just this really. It kind of came pretty quickly as far as the melody went, but I was really happy with that. I don't know how much about this. I'll talk loosely about this because I don't know how much you can say. going to be working on my first documentary, which is cool because I haven't done anything like that before. And this will be a feature that we're hoping is going to have some wide distribution, which will be really cool. But it has 4 different distinct characters that all have from different parts of the country who have different influences from punk to hip hop to Hildur Gudnadottir, like kind of Joker theme sort of stuff. And I get to kind of be like all over the place with this thing, which I'm really excited to just branch out like that. And kind of, actually, I'm really just excited to like create a fake punk band for this thing.
That sounds awesome, man.
So that we're starting on. There's so Schrader Thomas, he's a director in Austin, and I worked on Cheap Devils, which was a short film that came out this summer, and that was actually the project that I actually finally won my first award, IMDb award for Best Original Score.
No shit. Congrats.
Thank you. It's like I was blown away. I was so excited. It's
a big deal.
It's over there. Like,
what's it? Which one is it? Is it the Jack and Sally one?
No. So is it? I don't know how much you can see.
I can only see Jack and Sally next to a triangle.
Oh, so that is, well, I'm going to start losing your audience. That is my grandmother's metronome.
Oh, okay.
She passed away when I was like, I don't know, 10 years old. But she was an organ player. And she had some random stuff like that, but I got to keep her metronome.
Nice.
I always do kind of feel like it's going to like tick on its own at some point. And like,
no, if it ticks along while you're playing a song, you're just going to be like, well, I guess we're doing this finally.
Well, I would be like, Grandma, can you at least like stay in time? But so he and I were in pre-production on another film that we were supposed to shoot in November. Of course, it got like pushed back because of COVID. So I think we're going to shoot in January. But this project's really cool because it's kind of like this serial killer origin story kind of film. Which is a blast because it goes back and forth between the time that started all of this, which is in the 80s, and then to present. So I get to mess around with like some synth stuff for like the 80s scenes and then go back to, so it's like this very Nightmare on Elm Street kind of sound for that stuff, and then go back in. So like I love that kind of thing. And then Josh Malerman and I, we probably can't talk about a lot of that, but we have some things that are coming up that you should definitely be seeing probably early on in next year. So,
well, if you and this Josh fella want to come on after you're looking for that to be promoted, get your asses here, sir.
Absolutely.
Josh who?
He's this guy.
As nice as he is, he's one of the few guests where I was actually pretty fucking nervous to talk to at first, just because of who he is. And Brennan had to text me, dude, calm down.
The funny thing
Josh
is,
did a wonderful job of putting everybody at ease, though.
Yeah.
Like I've heard a lot of podcasts that he's on, but for whatever reason, about 15 minutes into ours, he just started doing impressions. And he never really let up on it. Like he would answer questions. He
came out of nowhere.
He would be himself, but you could count on an impression every 5 minutes or so. It was interesting.
It's funny. Yeah, like, I mean, the funny thing is, like, he's not immune to any of that. Like, I remember the first few times we would have Zoom meetings about stuff. Like, he would, the Josh Malerman outfit, the sport coat and everything,
And the hat.
He in the hat. And
He's
so,
gonna
like,
be a Simpson character one day.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, before we would have a meeting, like, he was always in that outfit. And likewise, I would make sure I was in like my coolest punk rock t-shirt, and like, my hair was all right and everything. And then, like, a handful of months into our friendship and stuff, it would be like, in our fucking PJs. All right, I'll let my guard down now.
Yeah, he seriously, he's the kind of author where I could see him being like George Romero in the sense where normally the author is hidden behind their stories, but Mallerman's just too, whether he likes it or not, he's just oozing with too much of a interest, and he's got a thing that I could see him being a Simpsons character and having a Halloween costume based off of his life. I always love when I see random posts by him where his fiance is dressed up like him.
Yeah, did you see that for Halloween?
I did, yeah.
She's incredible, man. Like she's such a character, and I mean she's a great actor in her own right. I like she's like they did a this crazy film. I don't know how many years ago it was. He probably doesn't want me to talk about it, but and she was in that, and she played a dude in it, and like to see her transform, like because she loves like makeup stuff, like I mean, that's her thing is like makeup design, and she's got skills. If you saw her in this thing, you're like, that can't be the same person.
He talks about Allison a lot, and at one point, after I don't even know how much time passed, he's like, "Oh, Allison's my fiance, by the way." Like me and Brennan knew because we listened to him, but for someone new, I feel like they'd be like, "Hey, I think I missed the introduction of that person."
You just assume everybody who's listening knows who Allison is, so.
Yeah. He's like, oh, Allison.
I like it. I love when couples love to talk about each other in such a nice way. As weird as that sounds, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, I won't ask you to confirm or deny, and I obviously I don't even know if this is what you're referring to, but I would just love to see the whole Carpenter's Farm thing get, a physical release treatment, a hardcover book with, Josh's story and Shane Douglas Keene's poems maybe at the beginning of every chapter, complete with, a vinyl of your I guess it could be a CD, but let's face it, let's do vinyl.
Josh would do it vinyl.
Josh would do vinyl.
That guy loves vinyl.
And I know Michael Bailey wrote a novella with it. And there are a few other people who I'm sure I'm forgetting who did either novellas or stories that go with it. I would love to see a physical release that just encapsulates that period, when we're dealing with something that we've never seen before. At this point, quarantine is old news. We've all been dealing with it for 8-9 months, and we're all dealing with it in different ways by November. But at that time when you guys were doing it in May or June or whenever it was, it was new. It was weird. It was to a degree frightening. And you guys entertained us all. To encapsulate that and kind of, set it in concrete, set it in stone with a physical I would love to see that personally.
So I'll answer it in this way and tease a little more. It's one of the things I was referring to.
Nice.
Now, so the album's already been mastered by this amazing dude in LA. The end result of that isn't quite set in stone, but there will be a release in early next year. The first version of that isn't going to be vinyl just yet, but that is the hope for a more permanent thing, for sure. Which is, it just blows me away. But I agree. That whole time, that was therapy for all of us that were involved in the creation of that stuff. Because it was scary as hell. It's, all of this is still, frightening. But at the time, it was all like, we didn't know what next month looked like. So I have asthma. So like, I was terrified of getting this thing. And so like, my wife was the one that would mask up and go to the grocery store for us. And I remember back then, like it was just so new. Like, she'd come in and like hose herself down in Lysol and whatnot. And it just, we didn't know. you know, but then we had this thing where it was like, again, when social media is at its best, connecting people who've never met in person to do this really intimate thing, which is create art together and bring all of these mediums together to just be vulnerable. I mean, Josh, first and foremost, be vulnerable to like write a thing in front of people and like, I'm gonna make mistakes. Like there's typos all over this thing, I'm sure, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that, you know, just kind of goes back to, you know, the character he has, which then goes back to, again, the kind of music that he loves is very in step with, you know, my upbringing. And I think it just comes back to like just genuine, I want to make a thing to make people feel a way. I don't want it to be too heady. It's not about me. This is just a thing I want to present. I mean, we're all into any kind of art, and I do think it's mostly, I don't think it's all escapism, but it's a big part of it. And I don't know. That was forever. I will remember this time.
And I don't think you're wrong labeling it escapism, especially at the time that it was coming out.
Yeah.
Like it was absolutely escapism. Now, I remember a lot of authors within the horror genre either making their ebooks free or like down to that 99-cent mark, 'cause not only to, you know, help people, but to encourage them to stay home. Like, hey, here's something to do. Here's,
Yeah.
you know, here's 6 hours of reading. Download it for 99 cents and fucking stay home.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hate a second round of that, you know, since our numbers are over the moon. I know that they are here in Massachusetts. I saw, I don't know if you read or heard about Paul Tremblay's book Survivor Song,
Yeah.
where, you know, he wrote it, you know, well over a year ago, long before he could have predicted COVID, unless he's some sort of, you know, magical man.
He is brilliant.
He is brilliant. Question. And he, you know, made some offhand comment in his book that Massachusetts had seen 10,000 deaths due to the plague that he, you know, created in his book. And now Massachusetts has bypassed 10,000 COVID deaths. And the numbers are just out of this world. I'm getting away from what I originally said, but you know, all of the people who made their books either free or cheap, to the community coming together was incredible right off the bat. Like from,
Yeah.
I believe the date was March 13th, because it was the last time before yesterday that we had a Friday the 13th, and it didn't wind up so well. And then, you know, for Josh to say, I'm gonna do the, you know, literary equivalent of a live album, in order to, you know, just send something out to people who are home, who are scared, who are nervous, who are living through unprecedented times. And then for you to join him, for Shane to write that poetry. And you know, Shane is a friend of the show, and he is an incredible poet. He is, you know, if you read his poetry, it's really wonderful stuff. He is just an absolute talent. And before this, I feel like he was I know for a fact that he was very reticent about putting his stuff out there and, you know, letting people read it. And for him to say, I'm going to read a chapter, I'm going to write something in response to it, and I'm going to put it out there for everybody to read. That was huge, and it's great stuff. For everybody to come together and basically kind of collaborate, music, poetry, prose, on this project, it was absolutely freaking huge for the community at large to be able to read, to be able to hear, to be able to immerse themselves in. And you know, I'm glad to, you know, we're happy to talk to you all these months later that you were part of that project.
It it was exciting. I mean, it was a thing but also, I mean, Shane and I, we've hung out, got drunk together on a Zoom call before. Like he's such a cool guy. He has such a cool voice. I want to do like a spoken word album with him.
He
like
sounds
I would
like
love.
a profane Mr. Rogers.
Yeah,
I've heard that somewhere.
he's so cool. But like, I don't think any of us are immune to those insecurities. The first thing that I wrote for Carpenter's Farm, I like uploaded and tagged Josh on two pieces. I then second guessed the second thing that I did, and I hated it, and I deleted it. And then when he was commenting to me, he was like, "Hey, I love this one thing, but I'm going to this other thing that you tagged me. Now it says it's gone." And I'm like, yeah, like I was all insecure about it. And then sent him that thing, and then he loved that more than the thing that I thought was better. But it was kind of like after that, it was like, okay, this process, this project, it's all about that. We're just gonna like show our cards, just I mean, there were chapters that I was like, well, that was shit. And but it's out there, and it's like, hey, this is what I had. This is me. And but
that's awesome, man. And you are a very fun person. And I just want to say my wife seems hard to impress with when I'm like, hey, so we got this guest and that guest, and because she's not into horror. She's fucking smarter than me, but she doesn't read much. Yeah, not a high bar. But I bring that up because today while I was making dinner for us, I was just playing your soundtrack for Carpenter's Farm. I'm like, hey, we're gonna have this guy on the show tonight, and she was like, oh wow. And that's all she said, but trust me, that means a lot. It was like,
well, there's a tangible element to it, like you say, we're gonna have, this author. She's not gonna read the book, man. She doesn't like the books we do.
She doesn't like the books I write.
So it's actually talented. Like, listen to him bang on that guitar.
Let's move to what are you reading? Because I know you're a reader too. We've pretty much established that throughout the show.
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, I just bought. It came in Amazon today. Speaking of, and no like ass kissing or anything, but Mad Black Wheel, which I have yet to read, of Josh's. I just got also, which I think I was going to finish reading first, and shit, now I can't remember.
Oh, I see Coraline. I just noticed that.
Oh yeah, that like. I mean, the movie was cool, but that book was phenomenal. Who am I?
I feel like Neil Gaiman is kind of like a personality metric. Like, if you know who Neil Gaiman is, and you know what, even if you know who he is, but especially if you enjoy his work, I want to hang out with you.
So
if you know who he is and you hate him, fuck you.
He was the, I don't know. For me, he was kind of like the drug that sort of like brought me back into reading. So like, I remember when I was a kid. So I was the generation of scary stories to tell in the dark. That was the book. Like,
I think all three of us are kind of Pat. Can you confirm that?
Yeah. I wasn't actually for that series, but I was old enough. I was like super into Goosebumps.
God damn you. 1980. Pat was born in 1989.
Yeah.
I don't know when you were born. I was 85. Patrick is a baby, relatively speaking.
Yeah, no, you're the youngest one in the group. It's all right.
A bearded baby.
But like scary stories, I mean that was a thing. I mean that was like the coveted, book, that series. Goosebumps, sure. But I remember like reading Christopher Pike when I was like in junior high, and
he's big too.
And he, I remember like, I think I wrote it down because I thought about it. Whisper of Death. Not a very cool title, but I remember
that's actually a really cool title, I think.
Hey, it's all right. But that book was the first book that I read that like the story like twisted and did this whole thing that just sucked me in, and it was like the first thing that I read like within a couple days of getting it that made me go like, oh, like, well, books are also cool. Like, and so like I had those kind of moments, but for sure, like Neil Gaiman, uh, uh, Graveyard, Graveyard Book. That was the name of that book. The Graveyard Book.
It is the Graveyard Book,
Yeah.
yeah.
That like, I mean, that like grabbed me. I mean, Neil Gaiman, yeah, he's one of my heroes. American Gods, of course. Like, but the thing that I was thinking about that I just got was The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher.
Mm-hmm.
I just got it like a couple days ago. I was like 2 chapters in, and this is the first thing of hers that I've read. I can't remember her real name. That's her pen name. But in this story, she's recently divorced, and the way she writes about divorce, I'm like, okay, she's either been through this or knows someone very close, because it was just stuff like, her ex is posting things like, every day's a gift, that's why they call it the present. And I'm like, oh, I've fucking been there. Like, but, yeah, so that's those two are kind of what I'm diving into this next week. But Ted Grau, T.E. Grau, he I don't even know how I found him, but a couple of his books really like sat with me that I still think about. There was one, I can't remember the name of it. It was a novella, but it was like this super cool version of a vampire story where what the hell's the name of that book? I give books away after I finish it. Like, I used to hang on to them and hoard them and stuff, but as soon as I finish them, I always give them to someone that I think will enjoy, so I don't have it here anymore. But it was this awesome story that this girl who was in love with this other girl who had it in her head that the reason this girl was sick, the thing that would cure her was if she had been a vampire and she could make her eternal. And at the beginning, you're just like, oh, she's just psycho and that's not a thing. And so she's trying to find actual vampires in her city. And she's just ending up at these goth clubs and stuff. But then the real vampires of that city are noticing her, that she's kind of following this path. And it was awesome. I would love to see that as a film. It was so cool.
That would be neat. I actually, I did a tweet about I meant to say earlier about the book Coraline, where I bought it from a thrift store, and I took a picture of the front. It's the same paperback cover as yours.
Yeah.
I took a picture of the back, and there were stickers on it. That shit pisses me off because it like ruins the book. So I just
have you read Coraline, Pat?
Nah, dude, it's in my it's on my bookshelf. Well, I've seen the movie. Dude, I have so many fucking books, man. I just buy more than I can read. But
Chris, real quick, we have
I wasn't done or anything, but that's fine.
You know what, Pat? I guarantee this was in your head somewhere to come out. But we have a friend of the show, Cassie Daly. She is an author / artist, and she is on this show called The Pikecast, where they basically read a Christopher Pike book and they dissect it. Some people from the perspective of, I read this book when I was like 12 and now I'm reading it again at 32, or whatever age, and they talk about it. We're gonna throw your name at them.
That would be really interesting to revisit that stuff, because I mean, those were like multiple years
of that. Yeah, there's 3 hosts of that podcast, and they usually, Pat, maybe you can correct me. I think that every episode has a guest host where they bring somebody, from outside that main 3, and they read a Christopher Pike book and talk about it. I think you would make a wonderful guest on that show.
That would be a blast. Yeah,
I'm gonna read the first Pike book. Yeah, I agree.
Pat has one he's calling dibs on.
Well, no, I like the cover. It's the Eternal Enemy. I've never read Pike before, so that'll be fun. That'll be in February. But yeah, you would be. I assume would be a fine guest on the show. But
Pat, I interrupted you. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
But Chris could prove me wrong.
I hope to not.
Are you saying he'd be a terrible guest?
That's what I said.
Really
He's been a fine guest today. But I was just saying that Tag Neil Gaiman in a tweet that had the back of the cover and said, "Hey," I'm paraphrasing myself. I tried looking for it, I can't find it. But I basically said, "Hey, does this warrant me burning down the thrift store?" And he just said in his nice, polite way, "No, please do not do that." And it blew up. The tweet blew up. I wish I bookmarked it, but
he is British, so he is polite.
He's polite, but I also remember hearing him say he was, and I don't know what interview this was or like how long ago it was, but he was talking about the students, college students that would reach out to him for like book reports and stuff, and he hated it, and so his reply would always be, "Pretend I'm one of those dead authors. I don't mind. Just write about me as if I'm dead."
When you have an author who is creative, inspiring, and non-problematic, like, oh my God, latch onto them like grim death. And Neil Gaiman fits all three of those. He's just, everything he writes is creative as fuck. It's wonderful. It's imaginative. And he's not a bad person. He's a good person.
Have you listened to his? So he did the narration for Neverwhere, his Audible book. Holy shit! Like it ruined Audible books for me because I'm like, well,
I've read the book twice. I have not heard the Audible
because it's him and he does all these voices and all the characters and stuff, and it's just like it. I mean, I lost sleep because I just sat up and just listened to him.
He's just a wonderful human, you know.
Yeah.
And we need those. We need in 2020 more than any other goddamn year.
We can use them.
We could use wonderful humans.
Now, where can people follow you?
I mean, primarily Instagram, Twitter. Instagram, Chris Campbell Sound. And the reason is because I had Chris Campbell Audio, which is where everything else is, but then something got jacked up with my Instagram handle. I had to start all over again. So Chris Campbell Sound on Instagram or Chris Campbell Audio on Twitter and chriscampbellaudio.com. You can find all my stuff there.
And we highly recommend going to the SoundCloud is where I've found your a lot of your stuff, and I've
which the link is right there when you get to my site. So yeah,
we will have those in the show notes for anyone that needs help finding them. Chris, is there anything you want to say before we say goodnight? Or Brennan, is there anything that you want to say before we say goodnight?
Chris, you first, because he asked two people at the same time.
No, I just this has been a blast, guys. I'm honored that you reached out to me. This has been fun hanging out. And
absolutely,
yeah, thank you, man.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I love having musicians on here because I can, talk to them about nerdy musician stuff. Unfortunately, after this episode with Chris, people will probably no longer tune in if we say, we have a guest who is a musician, because they know I'm going to talk about music theory and stuff like that. We had Nelson Everhart, like Pat mentioned. We have you. Next, people know that we're going to be talking about matrices, which Patrick is not as cool as it sounds. That's in Music Theory 4. It's right after you learn that you spent Music Theory 1 through 3 learning the rules so that you could break them, but it's before you realized that musicians have basically turned everything into math, and music no longer has any creative aspect to it.
Boring.
Yeah, fucking boring as shit. Yeah, no question. But Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love being able to kind of talk composition with somebody who can look at it from that aspect of a prolific creative, and also can look at it from the aspect of a I understand the keys. I understand the creative process behind it, the timbre and everything. I've loved this conversation.
Oh man, this has been a blast. I'm honored. Thank you guys.
Yeah, and anytime next year, brother, let us know.
You got it. Yeah.
Everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this. Check out Chris's music. He's got plenty to come by the time that you hear this. Well, actually, this is only a week away, so probably nothing new by then. But he's got a lot on his plate. But we highly encourage it. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brennan. Listeners, thank you for listening to nearly 2 hours of us. I'm cutting that out. Hold up. I fucked up. Thank you, listeners, for listening to the entire almost 2 hours of this episode. We hope to... God damn it. Dude, I worked 10 hours.
Get your shit together.
I got this. Third take. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for almost 2 hours. Appreciate you and have a good one.